What's up, guys? Welcome to Motocross Action's tested video on the all-new 2022 Yamaha YZ125 two-stroke. We are very excited to test this bike. I think it's the most highly anticipated bike of the new model season. It has received some impressive upgrades. It still has the same frame and suspension components that we had all the way back in 2006, but the big but, it came with new engine, all right? We love the frame, we love the suspension on this bike, but now we got a faster engine, or at least we think it's faster. Yamaha's put a lot of R&D time and testing into this engine. It's also got new updated bodywork, different subframe, different seat, different fuel tank, plastics, brakes, and more. So we're really excited to get on this bike today, put day one of testing in. We're gonna have multiple days of testing in this video, comparing this bike to last year's model and to some of the Austrian brands as well. So let's get into it. After 2 days of testing, we've got a lot of hours on this new YZ125. We've had 6 different test riders hop on this bike and give us their opinions, and we've tested a lot of different settings on this thing. We tested different gearing, we tested different jetting, and we've had a lot of fun on the YZ125 two-stroke. This thing is all new. We started out here at Glen Helen on a Wednesday. Yamaha had the track rented out, beautiful and perfect for filming some good videos on the new two-stroke. Then we came back here for Thursday, had another long day of riding and testing on this bike, and now we're excited to give you guys our review and our opinion on the 2022 all-new YZ125. Starting off with a little bit of history about the YZ125, it was interesting to note, and actually new for me to know, that the YZ125 and the YZ250 two-stroke were both the first 2 models to come into production for Yamaha, and I believe that was 50 years ago. So the YZ125 has been around for a long time. Let's look at the things that are the same on this bike. It still has that same plug-and-play aluminum frame that this bike got way back in 2005, and it still has the same KYB suspension components that came back in 2006. Really, when we look at the YZ125, we carbon date it back to 2006 because that's when it got the SSS forks. They're the same forks and shock on this bike, but the internals of the forks have actually been updated on this one. So it's pretty similar. You can still fit last year's forks in these triple clamps, but the internals have been updated on this bike. Crossing over from the YZ125 last year to this one, the swing arm, linkage, wheels, triple clamps, foot pegs are all the same as last year, as well as the front number plate and the front fender, which came off the 4-strokes. The clutch components are also the same. The clutch plates and steels are the same, but the clutch springs did get a little bit stiffer for the 2022 model. Let's look at the changes that are different on the YZ125 but are shared with the YZ250. So we recently rode the YZ250 model. That bike got some big upgrades, but the engine was exactly the same. The difference is for the YZ125, it got an all-new engine, and that is something that we are very excited about. The subframe is different. It works with the new bodywork that comes out on this 2022 model, and it allows more air to get into the air box and into the intake of the engine, which does help out with how the engine works, engine efficiency, and engine power. So the new air box is different. It's got a new seat to work with that new air box and let more air in through the back side of the seat. It also comes on and off with one 8mm bolt instead of 2 10mm bolts of the side number panels. So that's different for the seat. The seat is also flatter, lower in the front, taller in the middle, making it overall a much more flat seat, making you ride on top of the bike rather than sitting into the bike. The fuel tank, it's a little more narrow and it fits the new bodywork. Also, the shrouds are the same. The air filter cage is the same with less wings on it to allow more airflow to go in there. The side number plates are the same. The front and rear brake systems are new and improved. They're crossed over. They come from the 4-stroke range. They're going to be stronger braking and also lighter as well. And also the rear sprocket and the chain are lighter on the new YZ125. So those are all things that cross over between the YZ250 and the YZ125 that aren't as really groundbreaking for us because we just got done riding the YZ250 about a month and a half ago. What is new on the YZ125? Why are we so excited about this bike? Well, it has an all-new engine that has new cases, and basically every functional part of the YZ125 engine is updated and new, although it doesn't look super different on the outside. Looking at it, the YZ125, you're like, yeah, it looks kind of like it did last year. That is not the case. When you talk about the internals, when you put last year's engine up against this one, quite a bit different. So starting off, the whole engine has been tilted forward 4 degrees. So that's tilting it forward. It's getting more air to come in and making a straighter air intake, just allowing more efficiency going into the combustion chamber. Cylinder head has been updated. The piston's been updated. The piston pin has been updated. The connecting rod, the crankcase, crankshaft, flywheel, expansion chamber, cylinder head shape. It has a revised cylinder port shape, an updated cylinder port timing. The power valve shape has been updated with a new governor to control the power valve. The transmission also has new ratio and wider gears. It's got a new shift shaft, new shift fork, new Kickstarter shaft, and a few more things inside of the engine. So a lot of updates going into this YZ125 engine, and it's something that we really appreciate and something that we were really excited about. Everybody was wondering, is the new YZ125 a KTM killer? And that's what we're here to find out. A few other new parts that come on the YZ125. It has a new airbox that has a different air boot than the YZ250, specifically made for this bike. It also has a new carburetor, so it went from the Mikuni TMX 38mm carburetor that the YZ125 has had for years and years, and it actually adopted the Kian carburetor with the power jet that comes from the YZ250. It also comes stock with Vforce Reeds that I'm really stoked with, an aftermarket part coming stock on this YZ125. That's really cool. The pipe and silencer are also new. Bridgestone tires come now instead of Dunlop and more. So a lot of cool stuff on this YZ125 that make it different. Now let's get into the nitty gritty, the specs on the YZ125. How much does it cost? Well, the new YZ125 is up $300 from last year to $6,899. And it also comes with the Monster Edition. That one retails for $7,099. So an extra $200 price jump just to get the plastics and graphics. Comparing the $6,899 YZ125 price to KTM, KTM is over at $7,499. And Husky comes in $100 over that. So the YZ125 is all new for 2022. Incredibly, it's only $300 more expensive than last year's model and still quite a bit cheaper than the Austrian brand. So that is good. Horsepower, last year's YZ125 came in at 34 horsepower on MXA's dyno, while the KTM was 37.5 on MXA's dyno. So we were able to get our YZ125 on the dyno, and the dyno numbers did confirm what we felt on the track. So the new YZ125 is stronger than last year's model in the mid-range and in the higher RPMs, and it has about a half a foot-pound of torque more, but it's slower off the crack of the throttle, which is exactly what we felt on the track. So the new model, about 1 horsepower stronger than last year's bike, which still leaves it below the KTM and Husqvarna, but it definitely is an improvement. It went from Dunlop tires to the Bridgestone Battlecross X20 tires, and it has a 100 on the rear. So also talking about the weight of this bike, last year the YZ125 weighed in at 201 pounds on the scales. MXA hasn't been able to weigh this bike yet, but talking to the Yamaha guys, they do say that the new YZ is a little bit heavier, about a pound or 2. Reason being, the Bridgestone tires are heavier than Dunlop. Also, there's a little bit more plastic going on with this one, where if you look at the side angle of a YZ125 last year, they had pretty small shrouds with the tank being used as a lot of where you're gripping the bike with. Now you have a tank, and then over the top of that you have some plastic, so that's a little extra plastic there. Also, the spring rates are stiffer. Fork springs and shock springs are stiffer, which means a little bit bigger coils on the springs, and they said that that would make it a little bit heavier as well. So just a slightly heavier for 2022. As mentioned, spring rate went up from a 4.1 in the fork to a 4.2 spring rate, so stiffer spring rates are making the bike hold up a little stronger. In the rear, it went up from a 46 to a 48 shock spring. So overall, suspension is stiffer, holds up a little bit more, and it's going to be better for heavier riders and faster riders. The valving was also updated on the suspension, making it a little bit stiffer as well. And then looking at the carburetor, it went from the Mikuni TMX 38 carburetor that it's had for years and years. Now it has the Kian PWK 38S carburetor. It's the same carburetor that has come on the YZ250 since 2001. Basically, this one has a new power jet in it, which is electronically controlled to provide additional fuel at different RPMs. So cool part about it, it can be mapped with the CDI, and basically that's advancing the fuel and giving you more fuel at different throttle positions on the YZ125. So talking to Steve Butler and the guys at Yamaha today, they said that it's mapped currently to give you more fuel between 5,000 and 9,500 RPM once you're past 50% throttle. So basically, having a power jet, having it be able to be controlled by the CDI is something that's better for aftermarket engine builders, better for tuning, and also prevents detonation as well by just adding more fuel to the engine in the high RPM ranges. So that's pretty cool and something that they're really excited about on this new bike. The pipe and silencer are different. You're not going to be able to take your pipe and silencer from your previous year's YZ125s and throw them on this bike. They won't fit. My favorite part though is the shorty silencer. The stock silencer from Yamaha sounds amazing. It sounds like a shorty. It's a lot more throaty and it sounds a lot more like a race bike and something that's really exciting. The Yamaha power valve system was updated. Also inside of the combustion chamber, it has a new shape. The height of the combustion chamber has changed. It's about 1.6 millimeters now. The volume inside of theirs is updated. It's bigger, 2.4% bigger. The compression ratio went down from 8.57 to 8.2. The piston was updated. The skirt shape was updated to match the ports inside of there. More notes, it's got a longer connecting rod connecting that piston. It went up from 102 to 110 millimeters inside of there. The crankshaft has increased rotational inertia and the flywheel was increased as well. Rear sprocket went up from a 48 to a 49 as well, so quite a bit different on the YZ125. How many internal engine parts or really engine related parts can you swap over from the 2021 to the 2022? Long story short, not very many. Vforce Reeds, however, are the same. So if you have Reeds on your Yamaha two-stroke, you can put those on your 2022. The clutch plates are the same. However, the 2022 has stiffer springs. Other than that, it sounds like most of the things inside of the engine are different on the 2022. So that is one con. You're not going to be able to take a lot of your parts off of your older bikes and put them on your 2022. But it does go to show that Yamaha put in a lot of effort to make this bike all new and to really increase the power on it as well. Let's get into the fun part of this video. How did the 2022 work on the track? What was it like comparing it to the KTM and comparing it to last year's models? Well, first off, we got to talk about the ergonomics and the difference in how the Y125 feels just sitting on it in the pits and while you're riding it to the track. The new seat on this bike is way different. If you've watched our YZ252 stroke video, you'd hear us talking about it because that has the same bodywork and the same seat. The seat is a lot more flat and it helps you to sit on the bike more rather than into the bike. And this is something that was a pro and a con for me. I liked it because it felt a lot more modern. I felt like I was on top of the bike. I could really push it through the corners. Because the seat is higher in the middle, it does feel like the rear end is a little bit higher, especially than last year's bike. And even when you compare it to a Husky or a KTM, it sits a little bit higher as well. Talking about the ergonomics, definitely like the look of this bike a lot better as it's a lot more modern looking. Diving into the suspension, the 2022 YZ125 is a lot better suspension wise, especially for pro riders and for heavier riders. Why? It's got stiffer spring rates, as I mentioned, stiffer valving. For a guy like me out there and the 6 different test riders that we put out there, we all felt a lot more comfortable on it. It holds up through the bumps better. It holds up if you case jumps or if you overshoot jumps. It's a lot better to have a little bit stiffer suspension. I would say last year's YZ125 suspension was ultra plush. It wasn't bad, we really liked it, but it was definitely too soft for the average or even really the average racer or experienced racer is definitely too soft for them. Where now the 2022 suspension is stiffer, something that we can feel confident pushing without taking it to pro circuit or another suspension tuner to make it stiffer. So that's a huge plus in the suspension department. Getting into the sound, I already mentioned it, but man, the shorty silencer made this bike sound like a race bike on the track. Sounded a lot cooler, a lot better, and it was something that once we jumped on the 2021 and went back and forth, that 2-inch shorter silencer definitely made a difference and something that made you feel like you were on a race bike even though it's still bone stock. Let's talk about the engine. first initial opinion about the YZ125 engine, I wasn't super impressed. It was a little bit hesitant off the bottom end power at the crack of the throttle, where I'm used to feeling the 2021 YZ125, 2020, 2019, 2018. All of those YZ125s were so easy off the crack of the throttle. They were great for the average rider. They're great for beginners. They're great for just people that want to go ride and have fun. Typically with a KTM or a Husky or even like a mod YZ125, bikes that produce more power in the mid-range and high RPM range, those ones are a little bit harder to get into the meat of the power. You have to clutch it a little bit more. You have to be a little more experienced to ride those, where last year's Yamaha, easy to ride. MXA, every time we've compared KTM versus Yamaha in years past, we would say we like riding the Yamaha better, but we like racing the KTM better because it was faster. Now, the new Yamaha YZ125 engine is a lot stronger in the mid and upper range, and that also makes it a little bit harder to ride and the low end grunt. So it's a little bit of a give and take. When you're making a mod bike, you have to search for power. You have to really figure out where you want your power, and with the 2022, they wanted it higher up. What did we do about the engine character? Well, we went to work with it. Thankfully, Steve Butler and the guys from Yamaha were hot on the spot, and they were there to help us out with the YZ125. We made some jetting changes and also a gearing change that really helped this bike out. So we went overall a lot leaner with the jetting on the YZ125, and thankfully Yamaha provides jetting when you buy the bike. The owner's manual comes with a little baggie that has extra jets in it, extra needles in it, and we used them. When we showed up at the track, Yamaha had already tuned the bike a little bit leaner from the stock jetting to a different needle. Then we went back to the stock needle, the NYEF needle, put it in the first position. Then we changed this pilot jet from a 75 to a 72, and we went to the air screw. We went 3.5 turns out. On the main jet, we went from the stock 160 to the 162, and overall that made the bike a little more lean, but it also made it a lot more responsive and just kind of fixed and helped that little bog that we would get coming out of corners and helped us get into the power easier. We went into gearing changes. The bike comes stock with a 49 tooth rear sprocket. We threw a 50 tooth rear sprocket on the back. It really goes to show you when you're riding smaller bore bikes like a 125, the smallest differences and the smallest changes and updates really make a big difference on the track, and that was almost eye-opening for me because I haven't done a crazy amount of testing on 125s because really they haven't changed a lot in the last few years. Now we have a brand new one. We added a tooth on the rear sprocket. We went up from 49 to a 50. Man, it made a big change on the track. Yes, we had to shift way more, but for our pro and intermediate test riders, they didn't mind that extra shifting because it meant that they could pull a lot stronger and a lot harder, especially going up these steep Glen Helen hills. So we've been testing the YZ125 at our local stomping grounds here at Glen Helen. We get a little bit of everything here at Glen Helen, but for somebody who might not be dealing with the massive hills that we have here, the 49 tooth sprocket might be a little bit easier because you're able to ride in each gear longer. You're able to ride second through the corners longer without having to shift to third so quickly. We've also heard that the 48 tooth rear sprocket works good if you're on a track that doesn't have these steep hills as well. So next up, the big question, is the new YZ125 a KTM killer? First impression, I didn't think it was gonna beat the KTM. I didn't think it was gonna be as strong as soon as I started riding it on the track. After we made some changes to it, after we made some jetting and gearing changes, and after we spent more time on the bike, we came out for day 2. We brought our Husqvarna TC125, rode them back to back, and incredibly, I was actually a little bit faster lap time wise on the YZ125 than I was on the Husky. So that's something very exciting. We have a full MXA versus video coming out soon with our YZ125 versus Husky TC125, where I talk all the details about how they work on the track, the differences between the two, handling and engine wise as well as price. There's a lot of differences between those two bikes. So keep your eyes peeled to our YouTube and website for the future video that's coming out. 125 Yamaha versus Husky 125 as well. So diving more into it, I would say the new YZ125, yes, it's a first year model. That means that Yamaha is still learning about this bike just like we are. So I think they're gonna continue to refine the jetting on it, continue to make different parts for it, and I hope that Yamaha continues to put more R&D time and money into this bike. And one thing I'm also excited about is the hop-up tuners, the guys that are building engines, Pro Circuit and FMF and all the aftermarket companies got their hands full now as they got a new engine and a new platform to work with the YZ125. So we're excited to test out the Pro Circuit pipe, test out the FMF pipe, and more aftermarket parts on this new YZ125. So thank you guys for tuning into this video. Check out Motocross Action motormag.com. We have more bike tests, product tests, shootouts, race results, and all kinds of stuff on our website. Also, if you like this video, leave us a comment down below. Let us know what you're wondering about with the YZ125, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel as well to stay up to date with our latest videos. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you in the next one.